Hi, Lynn. How you doing this evening? I thought the live was going to be automatic go live, so I was sitting there waiting for it to start, and it wasn't. So I was in the middle of another. I was in the middle of Saturday's project. So I'll show you a little bit of it. That's all you get. That's all you see. I will post the requirements for it tomorrow on Facebook. I think it'll be 6 1.5-inch strips for Saturday. Yeah, I can't help myself. I have to tease. Look, so for anyone that was with me last Thursday, I couldn't find my roller, and it was right where it was supposed to be. Apparently, I can't see. Hi, Christine. Are you guys cutting and sewing tonight? Okay, you hear me? I had to tell Caspian to calm down. Gets a little excited when he's playing with his friends. Oh, Lynn, you're cutting along with me? That's good. Christine, are you cutting along? I got my pile of plates. Oh, my book. Let's see, we got about 4 minutes to go because generally I say 7 o'clock. You can cut, Christine, so let's do this. So Christine, we're cutting out the block tonight, but if you've already cut your block out, just sew along with what you have. That'll be fine. It's just practice. So if you've already practiced cutting it out, and it's a different block, that's okay. It's just a practice one. So my plastic shim isn't looking too bad these days. Everybody's looking in pretty good shape. Well, sort of. Pretty good shape, all things considered. I really have to figure out if it's bowed this way, do I turn it over or do I go this way? If I had a better attention span, I'd probably get that better. Just keep moving them around, I say. So do you ladies have any questions before we start? Everybody got their sewing machine already? So if you're using the same machine as me, I'm using the baby lot, and most of them have the, I went into depth on the last video, so that would have been Gemini Practice 2. Oh, Christine, you wanted me to repeat what I said about Saturday? No, that was just a sneak tease. Is that what you wanted to see? My little sneak tease? Okay, there you go. I did say that I would I'll put the requirements on Miss Loreens Schoolhouse Facebook tomorrow. I believe it's going to be 6 1.5-inch strips for the top. So it's one more pot holder, but this time we're going to do quilt as we go. Okay, Lynn, you said not yet, but I forgot what the question was. Truly, I just totally forgot what the question was. Okay. So I think it's 7 o'clock. Let's go to 7:01. And see if we can get started right then. Okay. Chris says yes, and Chris says yep. Okay. And Lynn says me too. Lynn said not yet. Chris said yes. Chris said yep. And Lynn said me too. And apparently I nodded off on that one. So 7:01. Okay. So back to the threading. Everybody's, oh, your sewing machines are all set up. I get it. Not yet. Me too. Yes and yes and yes. So if you're piecing and you're on a baby lock, you should have, unless you're, and this would be on a machine, I'm going to say like $500 and up, some of the electronic ones, and you'll have a straight stitch that has a little P, the letter P for piecing down in the right-hand corner, and the stitch will be a little right of center. And if you're using your J foot that came on your machine, your J foot, then and put your fabric to the edge of the foot, not past the edge, but inside the edge. That will give you a 1/4 inch seam. It'll also bring your stitch length down to 2, which is fine. Oh, Lynn, you forgot the question too? That's okay. We're all in this boat together, aren't we? Okay, so we got regular sewing thread in, Microtex 80 needle, 8012 needle, same thread in the bobbin, regular straight stitch. But again, I said if you're on a baby lock, you're going to use the straight stitch that has the little P, the letter P in the bottom right, and the straight stitch will be a little right of center, and that'll work with your J foot. If you're using a 1/4 inch foot with a guide, then you're going to use your regular utility number 3, I think it is, straight stitch. Don't use the one I just said, because your 1/4 inch foot with a guide has a single hole in the center, and you don't want to have your needle come down and it doesn't hit that hole in the center. It hits the metal part of your foot, and then that's not pretty. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be cutting out, and we're working on the, now see, every time I get close, I get glare. Oh, how's that? The tulip block. And I'm doing the 6-inch block, because on our project, we'll be doing 6-inch squares. So I'm going to do the 6-inch block. So what we need is 4, 2.5 inch squares. So if we look at the picture and we want to look at just the squares, let me see if I can zoom in for a second. How's that? Pretty good? Okay. So if we look at this one, don't look at this one. This one's easier. So if we have to have 4 2.5 inch squares, we have to look and see, well, which colors are those? So there's one on the corner, the other corner, the third corner. So it's 3 backgrounds. And then if you look in the center, it's one of the actual flower. So do you see it? One in the corner, the other corner, third corner, and then one in the center. Okay? And then we're going to look, and it says 4 1.5 inch squares. So 1.5 inch squares are going to be these little fellas. You probably can see them better here. See these little fellas right here? Here we go. Well, I have to do it so it doesn't glare. So those are like a little block almost to themselves. So that's 3 backgrounds and one of what you want the center of your flower to be. And then we need 8 2.5 inch half square triangles. So that 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Oh, my mistake. So I was counting just the color. So this block with the purple and the white, this middle block, that's 1/2 that's 1/2 square, and the other side is the other half square. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. All of them have the background. So we need half of these would be background, and then we need 2 for the leaves and 2 for the flower that go with the color that's the square. So you got that okay? Yeah, I'll put that like that so you can see that pretty good. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on that? Whoops, sorry, wrong way. Close your eyes if you get dizzy. Oh, too far, too far. Okay, let's try right about there. Okay, so I'm gonna set my book so I can still see it, and you've got your book to see yours. Doesn't want to stay over there. Oh, all right, I'm giving you too much glare, so let me do it this way. I'll do it that way. Okay, so the first thing we need is the first one is our 2.5 inch square. So let's go in. Our 2.5 inch square is the third one from the center. Okay, third one from the center. So that's our 2.5 inch square, and I'm just going to set it down. We also need our 1.5 inch square. So if we look at our little sheet, it's the very inside one. So we might as well go ahead and get that at the same time. Since they're quite a difference in size, we should be able to tell them apart. Okay? So we'll put the part we don't need, we'll put it away because we don't need to clutter everything up if we can help it. If you like to leave everything out, that's okay. I can't see it, it's okay. And then the next thing we need is the 1.5. Oh, I did the 1.5. So next thing we need is a 2.5 inch half square triangle. So make sure you pull out the box, the drawer that says half square, not quarter square, because there is a difference. They might look the same. Oh, hold on. Dropping my plates all over the place. There we go. Yeah. We move my stuff out of the way. So they might look the same, but they're not. They're not. Okay. Hi, Rhonda. Glad you joined us. Okay, so this time we need the 2.5 inch half square triangle. So the 2.5 inches, the middle one on the bottom right, as long as you have your outside cheat sheet the same way, say inside and out. So the 2.5 is the middle one. Okay, so we have all our pieces out that we need. We'll double check just to be sure. Mine are piled underneath here. Okay, so I'm going to look at my book once again, and it says we're on the 6-inch block for the tulip, 2.5 inch square, check, 1.5 inch square, check, and the 2.5 inch half square triangle, check. Okay, now we need to cut. Let's take our big square first. And we need 3 of our background and 1 flower. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start getting everything lined up with my, remember, the marked up one goes on the bottom, and I'm going to start with the Gemini down on the bottom right. The metal one, and I got my, and I'm trying to do this without a glare. I got my Gemini right, okay. And I got my tape right nearby because I'm getting a little bow that my dies don't need a little help hanging on. So I need my background fabric. Okay, so I've got some background fabric and my flower fabric. And I've got some flower fabric. So I don't need all this great big piece. And I should have cut it down earlier, but that's okay. So what I'll do is, set that aside for a second, move my plates, move everybody out of my way. Okay, so I think, and you can look at the last video. I think it's in there on the Gemini. So I have a fat quarter, and a fat quarter is longer than it is wider. So I don't want to cut off. So here's my salvage going across. Going across here is my salvage. That's the bottom of the fabric. So I don't want to cut this way because I'll lose some of my length down here. So I'm going to cut the length. So here's my salvage. I folded my fabric in half. I don't know if I can back up a little more or not. Let me see if I can back up a little more. Pardon me for making, there we go. Okay, so here's my salvage going across this way. So my fabric this way is only 18. My fabric this way is anywhere between 20 and 22. So if I cut across here to get a piece, I've shortened my 22. I don't want to do that. I might need some of that length later. So I'm going to cut so that my salvage is right here, running along here. I folded this in half. This is just a fat quarter. And I'm going to look at my square, and I'm also going to look at my half square triangle to get an idea of what size I need. So if we remember our straight of grain, which cross grain goes with the salvage, straight of grain goes from, what would that be, vertical from the salvage? So if you don't remember, you just do the test. and see which one works better. Oh, so my straight of grain is, I said it backwards. My straight of grain is, all right, let's see if, I'm going to see if I can show you this up close. And I apologize for going, zooming in and out. So if I pull the fabric this way, you see how it kind of stays flat? And when I pull the fabric this way, oh, can you see that ripple? Does that make sense? So that's the cross grain. So this is my straight of grain, which runs along the salvage. Okay, but once the salvage is cut off, if you've got a piece of scrap, you're not going to know where the salvage was. And generally, when you snap this, it's a higher pitch than when you snap this one is a lower pitch or a lower noise. So go ahead and try it with your fabric, and maybe you'll see what I'm talking about, or hear what I'm talking about. Oh, I don't think you need all my arms in there. There we go. Okay, so I can come in a little closer. So the square doesn't matter which way I put it down, and I mean which way in that. Let me fix this again now that I messed it all up. Here we go. So when I put my square down, it doesn't matter if I put it which way. I just don't want to put it on an angle. Follow me? I don't want to be on an angle. I want to be straight. So it doesn't matter which edge I'm straight on because all four edges are the same. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what I need to cut to get to work with this for this block. And now this one needs to have the straight of grain along the straight part. I got tape or something on there. Not the long side. Look here. So I need to be this way. You see that? The long side does not run either this way or this way, because when you sew, this angle, what is that, 45 degree, this 45 degree angle is on the bias. That's the most stretchy way of the fabric. So I don't want this on an outside edge, because then I start to get like waviness in my block. I want it on the inside, which means that if I have a block, you just pretend I've got a block here and I've got another block here, and I'm sewing the two together. When I sew them together, I'm sewing right away, I'm sewing this bias edge so it can't move. And now my outside edges are on straight of grain, or at least straight of grain or cross grain, so they won't stretch as much. Does that make sense to everyone? I'll give you a second to, if you have any questions. Oh, it's, what is it, 7:17, and it's dark out already. That's just me crybabying. Okay, so I need to cut a piece of fabric. And I don't need to be perfect about it, but I don't want to waste a lot either. So I wanted to make sure that where this half square triangle was going, so I didn't say I wouldn't want to mess it up and do it that way. So if you've got less fabric and you think you want to do it this way, you don't. You've got to have that same amount of fabric, which is 2.5. So we're going to cut it about, well, I'd say 3, but I'm going to go 3.25. And this is for all you ladies and gents, because I have a few gents that I drive them crazy because I don't keep my fabric straight on my cutting mat, because I'm using the ruler. So if I put my ruler down, I can always put this guy on top and go, yeah, I got plenty of room. I could do it at 3, but I'm just going to go a little more because when we're first starting out doing this, we don't want to be too tight in our cutting. And what are you losing? 1/4 of an inch of fabric. So it's okay. So I went 3 1/4. So now I know if this one I need 3 1/4, then this one I need 3 1/4. Now, you see, I've got this piece over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this off. Or maybe I'll cut it to 3 1/4. I'll go to 3 1/4. I know I'm going to, oh, you know what? Let me go 7 because I can fold it over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. And as we make our Christmas table runner starting next week, we'll be doing this kind of thing. And you see my salvage there? And I had a salvage on this one. I'm going to lay them on top of each other, and I'm just going to cut off that salvage before I forget and end up having salvage in my block. Number one, it wouldn't look real pretty because it's white and my fabric's pink. And number two, the salvage isn't made, it reacts differently when you wash it and so forth. So just get rid of that salvage. Okay, and then I have my other flower that I only have a little center of. And the little center of it is like, what was it? The little square, 1.5 inch square. So I've got this piece of fabric. And again, you see, I don't want to lose that length in case I need some long piece. So I'm going to come over here to this short side. And I'm just going to take out like a little square here. And I'm going to make it a little bigger. So I'm just going to take a little 3 inch square out of here. So that's my center of my flower. And now I have just my leaves to do. Hi, Jennifer, glad you could make it. Okay, so again, this is a whole fat quarter. So I don't want to cut across the short side. I'm going to cut across the long side. Now I only have, 2 half square triangles. So I could, let me show you what I would do. So if I have 2 half square triangles, and would we cut 3 and a little bit more? So if I go over 3 and a little bit more, and I'm going to go to 7, because that's way more than I need. But and can you see? I just lay my ruler down. So my ruler's 3 inches. This ruler. So I just moved it over a little ways from the edge, and I went down and measured to 7 inches. So now I can just come up and across. And you could just cut it with scissors because you don't have to be exact, because we'll be exact when we cut. Okay? So I'm going to give everybody a minute to make sure they have all their fabrics. So we got some fabrics for our leaves. We've got a fabric for our tulip center. We got background. And we've got our tulip fabric. I don't have a lot of difference between these two, but that's okay. What size is that? Oh yeah, that's this little guy here. Okay, so I'll just give you a minute more. Everybody else have a drink of your water. Or wine, whatever you might be drinking. One of the W's. Okay, so I'm gonna set my fabric. Let me see, I'll set it here so you can see where it is. I'll set my fabrics right there. And I need to keep track of what I did with my little dies because I was moving everything around. So I'm going to set those right there out of my own way. And we're going to start with the square, the 2.5-inch square. So if we look at our, so let's bring our plates back. So remember, we got our, we're going to call it the well-loved plate. Gemini's down the bottom right. Our metal plate, bottom, Gemini's the bottom right. I'm going to get my plastic shim and my top plate ready. So all Geminis are down at the bottom. I don't want to hold that up because I know it creates a glare. I've got those ready, and I've got my tape ready. And I had an extra couple pieces, so I just put them back on top. Hopefully I can get them apart. Because you can use the tape more than one time. And we need our, we're going to use our square. Could we cut everything out at one time? Maybe, but then class would be over, and what would we do? Oh, iced coffee, Rhonda. Rhonda's having iced coffee. I wonder if it's flavored. Okay, so we'll want to remember with our dies, the smooth side is facing up, and the one with the little ridge, which is how it cuts, is facing down. It's going to cut down into the metal shim. So we want to put our fabric on. So we have to look back and look at, okay, I know I need a piece of this. Let's see if it'll, I'm going to see if it'll fit. Oh yeah, so I only need one piece of this. So what I'm going to do is, let's do this one first. So I got more fabric than I need. I'm gonna fold it under. Let me fold it up. I'm gonna fold it up just a little because I don't want it to get. I need to fit through here. If you've got the big Gemini, then you don't have any issue. And maybe next week I'll get the big Gemini out. So I just need one square, and I'm gonna run it through like that. Now, if I wanted to do my other ones at the same time, shall we go for it? What do we need? 3 of them? We need 3. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tape this fabric down so it doesn't get away from me. And then I've got my background fabric, and we need 3 of these. So we're going to fold it. Oh, let me do it this way. So I want to fold it so the fold is just outside of my square. So if I put my square there and I fold it up, I'm going to take my square out. And then I just have to fold it back. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight as long as, and this is the nice thing about having that a bit of extra fabric, is we don't have to be perfectly straight. And I want to make sure that all the layers under here, underneath, are, the edges are outside of this square. Okay? So then I'm going to take the fabric, the fabric I just folded, and put it right on top of the pink. And remember, I taped the pink down so it didn't slide away from me. I'm trying to do this so you can see, and then I can't see. Okay? And we don't have to be at the very top. We can be down, I want to come down a little ways further. Put my little piece of tape there. So I've got my 1 layer of flour, and I'm gonna fold this over in a second. I got my 1 layer of flour and 3 layers of background, and then this little die is gonna go, square die is gonna go right on top, and I'm just gonna put a piece of tape on that. And I'm taping fabric, die, little fabric, and the metal shim. This can hang out, it's okay, but I'm just going to fold it up out of the way. I just don't want to be near this die. And I'm going to fold this over just so I don't get caught anywhere. And that first little piece of tape that I used, I'm just going to put it right there. So you may not have had to go to all that trouble that I did, especially, like I said, if you have the big Gemini, because you got plenty of plate room. Okay, so we're good so far? So let's double check our pattern. We needed 3 corner squares of background and one of the center fabric. My fan's on, it's blowing my fabric away. I shut the door to cut down on the street noise and put the fan on, and now everything's blown away on me. Hold on. There we go. There we are. Okay. So now I'm going to put down my plastic shim and my good plate. My plate looking pretty good. Okay, are we ready? Everybody got their sandwich ready to go? Make sure your machine is on. I'm gonna squeeze my plates together to get them in the front. Oh, there we go. I was moving my whole my cutting mat was moving. That was a snappy one. Okay, so remember, I'm going to take my plate off. I'm going to turn it and turn it so that my Gemini now is in the bottom. Let's go for the top right. That doesn't seem right to me. Top right Gemini, and I'm going to just set that aside. Okay, and I'm going to make sure I take the bottom plate and turn that up so that's ready to go. And now I should have some squares cut. So let me get the tape off. And I've used this tape enough times I can throw this away now. You have to let go of it at some point. So I've got 1 square, 2 squares, 3 squares, and my, okay, so remember I told you if you have a little thread that didn't cut, don't yank it because you'll put a run in your fabric. Just snip it off. Okay, so we've got our squares done. So we can take our square die and our squares and set them aside because we're done with that. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim off all this little extra stuff. Get rid of that. Okay, and I can open this back up again in case I need it. So now we need, what's our second thing that we need? I'm going to go with instead of doing the 1.5 inch square, I always cut biggest to smallest. So I'm going to go with my half square triangle. Okay, so we need to look at our picture, and we have 4 half square triangles of the background. So let's just cut those first. Let's see if I've got enough here. I might. I'm not sure. I might. Oh, I just make it. How about you? Excuse me. So I cut mine. I folded mine 4 times or 2 times. Give me. Yeah, I got 4. Excuse me. I have 4 layers, and I'm gonna put them. I don't want to be too close to the edge. I'm not gonna try to save this to be like this size because that would just run me too close to the edge. but I would save this if I had a smaller half square triangle. So if I was working with a quilt and my background fabric was all the same and I had different sizes of die cuts I was going to make, this might be perfect for like the 1.5 inch half square triangle. So we're just going to do the background this time. So we got it on there. I've got plenty of room. If I want to tape it, pardon my arms. And I don't want to keep cutting in the same spot, so I'm going to move over here and just tape that down and get my scissors out of the way. And I've got my plates. Remember, we already turned our plates, so we're all set to go. Where this is like this end is like the biggest, it must be a 2-inch gap there. See how that works out. So I'm ready to go. Okay, so plate's coming off. I'm just going to turn it now so that the Gemini is on the bottom left, face down. And the same with my plastic shim. So my plastic shim is looking a little. Can you see the bow? It's quite the bow going there. Okay, I'm going to take my tape off. I can use that again. And I needed 4 half square triangles. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I'll do is I'm just going to cut off this part that's hanging, and I'm just going to save this part. I know I keep putting my scissors away. I can't help myself. So I'm going to save this little bit. I'm just going to clip it for now in case I need it in a while. And there's my 4 half squares of my background. I'm just going to put them over where I have the squares that I cut. So now I want to make sure that I turn this over and this over. Okay, so I should be Gemini wrong side, Gemini facing down, the word on the left side, and the same with this. And now I need to cut 2 half squares for my leaves. Did you double check your pattern? So I'm just have to fold this in half. And I can put this down with my half square triangle on it. And I can tape this. I can come up a little higher than that. And I can cut my little, I got plenty of room here to cut my little 1.5 inch square. And I need 3 backgrounds. So that would be really close. But I could get a background out of that. But I think I'm just going to save that. And I'm going to cut myself another small piece of background. And in this case, now this time I'll just cut it with my scissors. So I need how many of these? I need 3 of these. So I'm just going to cut a strip. So if you don't have a rotary cutter, it's okay. I'm just trying to line this up a little better. Let me move that all out of the way. And I just lay my little square on there just to get an eyeball kind of view. And you're gonna, hopefully you've got more room than I do. And I'm trying to have this edge as close as I can. I don't want a big gap there. And trust me, I didn't cut very straight. So I need 3 of these. There's my salvage. I'm going to get rid of that right away. And then I'm going to fold this. You see where I am right here? Okay, so I'm going to fold this. See, it fits in there fine. And then I'm just going to fold it back one more time. And again, if I had the large Gemini out, I probably wouldn't cut this off, but I'm just going to cut it off. And I'll save this for later. Still fine. Okay, so there's my 3 layers of background for my half square. I mean for my 1.5 inch square. And then I need one little bit from this is the center of our tulip. So I made this a little bigger, so I'm going to put it underneath the smaller ones because I don't want to cover them over. You see, if I put the pink one on top, because it's bigger, I'd have covered up the background and then I wouldn't know exactly where it was. So I've got the half square triangle like over on my left side and my little 1.5 inch square on the right side. And I am going to tape that down. Okay, so I'll just give you a second to make sure you got the same thing. Oh, I'm forgetting. We've got to do 2 pink flowers, don't we? Do we want to do them at the same time? We only have 2 layers. We only need 2 layers of pink. Let's see if my square fits. So I have this odd piece, and I'm gonna, instead of folding this way or the bigger way, I'm gonna go this way. And it doesn't matter that I'm folding a little bit over, but I just want to make sure. Oh, I got to check which way is my straight of grain. It's this way. So I'm good. I'm just going to lay, because I've got the fabric and the dye on tape, I'm just going to lift it all up and put this one right underneath. And I want to make sure that I can see the pink and the green up past the dye. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to do that because I snuck the other fabric in. So we've got 1 piece of fabric on the 1.5 inch square for the center of our tulip. Look, I'm all crooked here. Apparently I don't tape straight. Tried my fingers there a minute. There we go. And then I have 3 layers of background, and those are under the 1.5 inch square. And then on this one, the 2.5 inch half square, I have 2 layers of the flower fabric and 2 layers of the petal fabric, or the leaves. I mean, not the petal, the leaves fabric. Is everybody good with that? Okay, so my bottom is my well-loved plate, the metal plate that we're all taped onto. Plastic shim is next. And then what I consider the pretty plate, because it looks pretty good. And that's my sandwich. I have to stand up for this. Okay. Now I've got a little bit of pink fabric sticking out there. So I'm just going to crease that. And again, if you were on the regular Gemini, if it's laying on your plate, it'd be just fine. I just don't want to have any issues. Okay, so now I'm putting everything back together again. So I got my sandwich. I have to squeeze it in. And then help it along a little bit. Okay, we're done our cutting. So I'm just gonna put the plates away. Here we go. So I just have my tin plate. Or my metal shim, I guess. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3 backgrounds, and then one of the flower center of the little squares. And I'm not going to bother keeping that little bit. And then I have, get my tape off. When I stick my tape back on top of each other, I stagger them, otherwise I'd never get them off again. And I've got 2 green for my leaves and 2 pink. And I got a little, must be this fabric. Just a little, oh, that wasn't even, it really wasn't hanging on at all. And 2 pinks. And I think we've got everything we need to sew. And I'm just going to trim away this. I kind of get rid of this stuff as I go along. And so I can put this fabric in with my other pieces. So again, once we're working on our regular project, these are pieces that we would keep right with the project, because they would be fabrics that we would be using again and again as we make our different blocks, unless you're doing every block different. Okay, so to save time, I'm just going to take, so normally these, I would put these away right away, but I'm just going to set them aside over here so we can get down to business and you don't have to watch me doing my housekeeping. Okay, so remember now, let's see if anybody has any questions on their cutting. Is everybody cut? And I get a yes out of anyone. I want to see if, I don't want to get ahead of you. I don't want to get ahead of you, and I don't want to have you sitting there wondering what's taking me so long. So we're going to take our 4 little squares, and we're going to look at the picture in the book, and we're going to lay those down. So it's a little 4 patch. And then we're going to start putting down our flowers. And everything's not going to line up because this has got 2 seams in it before it gets hooked on. But let's get everybody where they belong so that we're sure that we have everything we need. Almost forgot what I did with my squares. I can shut off my machine. That now, hopefully. And which way do our leaves down? Okay. Oh, it's green, isn't it? Sure, does yours look like the flower in the first 4 patch into a block? Okay. So we're going to need 2 pins. And you're going to hear me say this a lot. So we're going to take our little 4 patch, and we're going to, so this is column 1, this is column 2. These are going to be like we're flipping the pages of a book. So I'm going to take column 2, and I'm going to flip it on top of column 1, and I'm going to put a pin in the side that I need to sew. Then I'm going to take the next one, column 2, like turning the page of a book, flip it onto column 1, and I'm going to put a pin in it where I need to sew. Okay? So you know we got all ready to sew earlier, so you should be all set to go. Have your wooden iron handy. And I'm going to go ahead and sew my 2. So when I come over to the sewing machine, my pin is right here on the right hand side, because I'm going to pull it out from the right. If you're left-handed, I guess you could go the other way. But I say in sewing, you got to learn to use both hands eventually. But I might not be lined up exact, but when I come over and I take that pin out, I know that I'm sewing on this side. And these are little pieces, so it's only going to take you a second to sew them. And we're going to take our time, and before we get to the end, I'm going to pick up my next one. So I didn't cut my thread. Remember, we did this last time in session, what was it, practice session 2. Again, I know that I'm sewing on this side, and I'm going to not quite butt it up against the first one. You want just a tad of space, and the reason I say that is that sometimes if you butt it up, you're really going on top of the first one, and then when you then you have stitches, you have all 4 pieces stitched together. You don't want that. So just a little space in between. And we don't need to do locking stitches. So now if I lay this down and open my book, you'll see they're going to lay right in order. The fan doesn't roll them over. They're so little. I'm going to take the top one and I'm going to press the seam allowance to the left. And on the bottom one, I'm going to press the seam allowance with my finger to the right. So we should look just like that. Can you see that? So see, this is all hooked together now, so you don't have to worry about it getting mixed up, because it can't. I mean, if it flips to the back, you can see that. But all we're going to do now is take our 2 rows, put them together, and because we have one seam going to the right and one to the left, they should lock together. Let me get a little closer. So they should lock together. Not sure if you can see that. I want to make sure that I feel it the whole way down here, okay? And if I need to, I'm just going to put a pin right after the seam. And I put it right after the seam because I'm going to have to take the pin out before the pin gets to the needle. And I would rather the needle get as close to the seam as possible so it doesn't shift before I take my pin out. And you just want to make sure that it's even all the way around. And just go slow. Make sure let me move back again. Make sure that your seam that's on top, doesn't flip back with the foot going over it. So just take your time. And if you have pivot on your machine, use your pivot. If you don't, you would just stop, lift the foot up a little ways, make sure your seam is laying flat. Okay, so now we have our little 4-patch, and I'm going to press the seam down towards the dark. So we could do a little swirl here. Let's see. Yes, we can. So let me come in. I'm going to come in closer for this one. Oh. And see if, I can't tell how bright it is. So you see how we have, this seam is going either up or down. And you see that? Okay. And then we have one seam, the seam is going up, this one's down, doesn't matter who's up, who's down. But they're going in opposite directions. What we want to do is, this is where we just stitched across. So we're going to take our, I guess I can use my seam ripper. And let's see if I can do this. Oh my God, did I put this seam ripper away? Must have been strong that day. Okay, so if you look across, you have your seam that we just did is going across, and it crosses over this seam. So we need to get rid of the stitches that are above this seam. So we're just going to take the seam ripper, and there should be like 3 little stitches. And it doesn't affect this stitch coming across. But we got to flip to the other side because it's a different seam and take those 3 stitches out. Okay? And generally you don't hold it up in your hand to do it. I'm just trying to show you how I do it. Okay, so now if I open this up, let's see if I can do it this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these seams go like a pinwheel. So this one is going to the right, this one would go down, this one would come up. And then you see, because we took those stitches out, see if I can, I know when we get up close to, oops, sorry, where am I going here? There we go. Can you see how we got like a little baby 4-patch there? See it? So that sits nice and flat. So that's a little swirl or a little pinwheel of your seam, and then everything sits nice and flat. So let me show you that. If I can get a little, there. Yeah, see the baby little 4-patch? Right there. Okay, let me back this up again. Oh, oh, sorry, making everybody dizzy. Okay, I don't have a push button. Zoom in, zoom out. I probably wouldn't be any better with that. So I can come in a little closer, I guess. Oh, in a closer, Lori, in closer. There we go. Okay, did everybody get that okay? And you see, I still haven't gone, I don't need to go to the iron. It's pretty flat. And I'm just going to put that back where it belongs. And I'll get you a little out of the line here. Oh, I guess I need to go back a tad more. There we go. Okay, so I put that piece right back where it was. Is everybody good so far? Okay, so now we're going to move along a little faster. Okay, so I want to take care of this. Now we need to finish putting together the rest of the half square triangles so that everything is a block before we put the block. Every row is a block or a square so that we can put the whole block together. So I'm going to take the second row, now this is the second column because now this has become column 1. And I'm just going to flip the background on top of the pink, line them up. And I know where to stitch because it should be the long side, but I'm going to stick a pin in there anyways because there's no telling. And if you remember from last time, we start stitching on, let's see if I can show you here. We start stitching on this edge Let me show it on the pink side. Maybe you can see the pink side better. Is that too much light? The light's in my eyes, so it's hard for me to see. But you see how we've got this angle here? We're going to start stitching just inside of where that angle and this angle come to a point. And that will give you your 1/4 inch seam. So we're going to stitch down to the point at the other end. And we're going to just do this one and put it back. And if you stitch from the pink side or the light side, doesn't matter. So I'm going to make sure that my needle is starting right near that point. I hear music. And let's see if I can show you. Well, I'm a little further in than I should be, but let's look. So we're going to press it to the pink side or to the darker side. And what I want to make sure of is I don't want to get a crease along here where the seam is. Okay. But I need to measure this. So if this square is 2.5, then this should be 2.5. And I'm pretty good. Let's see if it's square this way. 2.5. Okay. So I'm good to go. So if you're a little more than 2.5, you would trim it. But you got to trim it equally so that this stays in the center. So trying to see what ruler I have that would help you see that. Well, where I got that from? Hold on a second. Okay, let's take this one and see if I can show you. All right. So I'm looking for a 45-degree line on my ruler. So here's my 45-degree line. So I need to make sure that when I trim, that 45-degree line stays in the center. So if I have to trim a little off, I would come up and make sure, again, I can trim this. Can you see how the extra is past the ruler? Okay. I could trim that off. If you're lucky, and I think I might be lucky today. Hold on. Okay, I usually always keep a 2.5-inch ruler around. I don't know where mine is. So if I had my 2.5-inch ruler, I could lay this on here, lay the ruler right on with the 45-degree line, and I could trim all the way around equally. You just have to remember that you need to have the seam of the block, the center seam of the block, on that 45-degree of the ruler, and then whatever the excess is of your 2.5, you would trim off. If you need to turn it and trim more, that's fine too. But try to keep that 45 on that seam so that it stays the same all the way around. So I'm going to put that back, and now I'm going to go ahead and do this one. Flip it over. You know the drill now. Put the pin in it so I know I'm sewing on the correct side. If you want to be a little faster, you can do all of your half square triangles at the same time. If you're not sure, you just pick one up and do it, then pick the next one up and do it, and so on. I know last time I was a good doobie, and I put my pins back each time, but my pin cushion's way over the other side. And again, I'm going to press this to the darker side. Okay, and I want to make sure I didn't make a crease right where that seam is. And I'm just going to put this back how it's supposed to be. It's starting to look like more of a flower now. And the pieces are starting to line up more together. Now I'm going to go to the leaves. Let me just check and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, Jen says that's an awesome tip. I'm not sure which one it was, but thanks. Appreciate you making the comment, Jen. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to do our leaves. And they're both the same, facing the same direction. So we can do these chain piece them one after the other because we're not going to get anything turned around. So I'm just going to put the green on top of the background. And put a pin in that. And the green on top of the background. And put a pin in that. Oh, just flung my pin there. Now I have 3 pins out. That's too many pins. Just need 2. And put the pin in that one. Now I can stitch these both not at the same time, but one right after the other, chain piecing. And if your thread under the foot just gets in your way, sometimes it stops you from pushing the fabric under. Just push them out of your way. This thread just wants to hang on for dear life. It's not giving up its area. So I'm going to stop when I get near the end, and I'm going to bring my next leaf section in. Oh, I got a little crooked there at the end. It's all right. This is just practice, right? So now I've got the 2 of them, and see, this is chain piecing. They're all hooked together. But these guys we want to cut apart because they go in different places. So let me get some pins out of the way. There we go. So I'm going to press the seam allowance to the green side, to the leaf side. Okay, so Jennifer was talking about the tip about squaring up the little block. If you square all these little guys up as you go, then when you put your block together, you got a better chance of it being right. But if these aren't right, then when you put the block together, it's going to be all, wonky. And then you'll cry. So this is to eliminate some crying. And I'm just going to turn this so I know it's going in the right direction. And again, I'm going to press and you remember if we put the fabric on top of where we want the seam allowance to be behind, see when I push that up, see the seam allowance is right there. When I push that up, the seam allowance stays there. So if I did it this way, you see how the seam allowance is going to be behind the wrong side. So even if you use an iron, which you shouldn't at this point, you still want to flip it up. I don't press with an iron as a rule until the block's all together. Okay, so I've got my sewing pieces done. So I'm just going to give you a minute to make sure you're caught up. If you're all ready to go, you can, start putting it together. But I'm going to show you how I put this together with chain piecing. Just have to have a sip of water. Okay, so we got all our pieces here. And remember, if you fall behind, this video will be on YouTube. I'll make a playlist. I don't think I've done it yet. I'll make a playlist that's for the Gemini under my YouTube. So, and don't forget to subscribe, click subscribe and thumbs up and ring the bell and throw some words in the chat. Appreciate all that. If you're feeling the thumbs down, you can just let that go. It's okay. We're good with that. Okay. So on to our 9 patch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 3 by 3 is called a 9 patch. So we're going to do this just as we did here. Column 1, column 2, column 3. Okay, now, if you wanted to put together by the row, you can do that. But I'm going to show you how I chain piece it with the columns like we did last week. So I'm going to flip this one over, flip this one over, just like we're reading a book, turning the page, flip this one over. Okay, now I need 3 pins. I'm going to pick this up, line it up. You notice I'm not moving it all around. And I make sure I put the pin in the side I'm going to sew on. So I'll pick the next one up, give it a little line up, put the pin in the side I'm going to sew on. And you notice I'm setting them right back down again where they were. Last one, line it up. And I set it right back down where it was, okay? So column 2 is empty because we flipped the page onto column 1. And column 3 is still sitting here behaving itself, okay? I'm just going to pick up the top one, so that's row 1. Got my pin on the side I'm going to sew on. Once I come over here and I've got it in the as I'm supposed to sew it, I can take my pin out because I'm pretty sure I'll be okay at this point. And I'm going to sew these 2 squares together and stop when I get to the edge, like 1 stitch from the edge. I'm going to pick up the next one, row 2. Take the pin out. I want to be careful if I have a seam underneath that's facing that way so it doesn't flip back. I still haven't cut my thread. Row 3, picking it up. You notice I'm not going 100 miles an hour. I'd probably go a little bit faster if I was by myself. But faster sewing doesn't make better sewing. So I'm just going to lay that down exactly how I sewed it. And I'm going to open this up. And I want to decide, okay, which way do I want my seam to go? Do I want it to go this way or do I want it to go this way? Well, sometimes let's open up all 3 and then we can better decide. Okay, so let me move that up. Excuse me. So if I look at this bottom one, I've got a plain block and a block with a seam. So I want the seam to go towards the plain block. So I just stuck my thumb under the 2 pieces and I just pushed the seam to the left. left. And see how I have the plain block on the right, so I want my seam to go under that plain block. Okay, so this seam is going left, this seam is going right. I really need this seam to go left, so that when I put them all together, I can do that nesting the seams together next to each other, like we did on the little 4-patch. So I'm going to lift this up and I'm going to push that seam to the left. Okay? So left, right, left. So you think about it, we start at the bottom because with I have 2 plain blocks. I know for sure I want my seam allowance to go towards the plain block because they're not fighting this other seam. This guy has a seam here, but then on the other side it has. Okay, so now we're going to turn the 3rd column over to the 2nd. Okay, just like reading the books. I'm just going to flip it on to that one, flip it on, flip it on. Okay, and I can start right here and I can put my pin in. On this side, I'm going to sew on. I can get it straighter when I get over to the machine. Because right now I'm sitting down too low to see it. Okay, so I've got all my pins in. Not sure you can see them. All my pins are in. On the side I need to sew on. So now I can lift this up. Okay, and it's twirling around. It's okay because we know it needs to go where the pins are, so that all the pins are on the right-hand side. So once I bring it over to the machine, and I have the side I'm going to sew correct with my foot, I'm just going to make sure I line everybody up. Take my time. When I get done the first one, I'm just going to take a second and I'm going to make sure that I open up so that here's my first row. So see how it's all laying nice and flat? It's just easier. Get the first part done because have your needle down in the fabric, that's like having a third hand to help you out. And then get these guys all straightened out. So now see all my pins are over on the right-hand side. So I'm going to take the next pin out and I'm just going to make sure I've got it lined up right. Top and bottom left. I'm going to finish sewing the first row. I'm on the second row. And I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to make sure I've got this guy right. And remember, I don't want to butt it right up against the second row. I just want a tiny space between them. Because chances are if you butt up against it, you'll end up going over the second row, and your third row and second row will be sewn together. Okay, so see, everybody's all together. Now you just have to lay it down and open it up. And now this is going to be easy because I've got a plain row, a plain block, and a plain block. So my seam is going to the right. My second row, the seam is going to the left. It gave me a little struggle there. And then my bottom one is going to the right. So in essence, what we did, let me make sure there's no question. On the top row, the seams are going out. The middle row, seams are going in. The bottom row seams are going out. That means that we're going to be able to nestle all those seams to lay nice and flat instead of on top of each other. Okay. So if you really, really, really wanted to give it a little press, you would just take it like this to your ironing board and press. Just set the iron down, set the iron down, set the iron down, and that's it. Don't do any more. Don't do any of this stuff, because that will warp and distort your fabrics. Running out of water. So now we just have to get our 3 rows together. So I'm just going to give everybody, excuse me, a minute. I swallowed wrong. See if there's any questions. I don't see any questions yet. I think we're good. Some of you may just be watching and not sewing along, and it may seem like it's going slow to you, but you know, there's a lot of little things that you can learn about while you're watching. And even if you sew ahead, once you sew ahead, just stop and watch the video. Because I know some people like to sew and you know, move along. So you can go ahead and sew, but you know, keep the video going while you're sewing, and you might get a little tip along the way. Or maybe more than one. I can see here that when I stitched, all right. So you're sewing along and you're holding your fabric and you get near the end and you let it go. And then it starts to veer off. That's what I did. So I can just take this back, and I could just come back towards the middle, and then just come out a little bit more where I let it out of control. So I can hold my hand all the way back here, holding the fabric all the way back. Let go on that side. And we all do it. Okay. So we're going to flip row 1 down onto row 2. And it pretty well lines up because it's all stitched together. And now see, we have one seam going one way, the other seam's going the other way. You want to line that up and make sure you can feel that that's all set all the way down. Then we're going to put a pin just after the seam. Then we'll come over to the next one. And again, one seam is going one way, the other seam's going the other way. But we want to feel all the way down here, all the way down, because that helps you know that your block is square, all of that section square all the way down. So your edges will be straighter. And I'm just going to put a pin a little after that seam. So I'm actually pinning the seam allowance. And then I want to make sure it's straight across front and back, you know, so that your edges are lined up. Again, I know where I'm sewing because I know where my pins are. We want to be careful of the seams now. So the seam underneath for me is facing in the correct direction, which is facing towards me, so that when it goes under, the feed dogs aren't going to flip it because it's going the correct direction. This one on top is also going towards me, which means the foot won't flip that up. So we just have to wait until we get to the next seam, and my next seam is going the other way. I just want to make sure that my top fabric and my bottom fabric are lined up along the edge where the foot edge. Now I'm coming up to the seam that is facing towards the foot, so the foot will want to push it back. But if I keep stopping, and especially having the pivot, or if you don't have the pivot, just put your needle down into the fabric, lift your foot up a little bit, so you just make sure that that seam stays flat. And take that pin out. And again, I'm making sure that both my fabric underneath and on top are lined up with each other. Coming to another seam. This one's on the angle, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue. Okay. And I'm gonna match my ends, my two ends, my fabric underneath, the fabric on top. Those two ends should be together now. So let's see how we're looking so far. We're looking pretty good. And the seam is going to feel bulky back there. We'll take care of that in a minute. So now we're just going to lay it back down again. And now we're just going to flip one more time. So row 2 is on top of row 3. Make sure your seam allowances are side by side. Pin after the seam allowance. If you want to pin at the beginning, don't pin at the very beginning because then it'll be in the way of your needle. But if you want to pin at the beginning, just pin in a little ways. I went in about almost an inch in, 3/4, because there's no point in pinning at the edge because then you're immediately going to have to take the needle out. I mean the pin out. And then let's pin our next one. And again, make sure you can feel all. When I say all the way down, I mean all the way down that seam. See how my thumb is going there? Okay. Pin that one a little past the seam. Each seam is going in the opposite direction. And then if you want to put a pin at the end, you can. Make sure it lines up. Okay. That's a lot of pins to me. I usually, the more I pin, the worse I get. So what I do is I make sure, the first thing I do is just get it lined up and at least get a stitch or two. And then my needle's down. And I take that pin out. Then my concern is making sure that my two seam allowances at the first juncture stay where they're supposed to. And I just sew to that point where I get to that seam allowance. Take that pin out. Now my concern is the next seam allowance. So I just want to make sure that they're matched up. And I also want to make sure that my fabric underneath is even with my fabric on the top. I'm going to stop and put my needle down, my foot up, because I have a seam allowance. It's facing towards the foot. The foot will want to flip it up. Okay, I'm going to take the next pin out. So if I didn't have this last pin in, which I normally wouldn't, once I get past the seam, just past the seam allowance, I'm going to make sure that my two ends are even. I'm going to kind of pinch and hold them together so I'm like pressing down here because I don't have a whole lot to hang on to. And I'm going to go slow because I've got that diagonal seam that's facing towards the foot. And I'm just going to put my needle down, my foot up a couple times just to make sure I get that seam allowance laying nice and flat. And this time I'm going to hang on to it right to the end. Didn't mean to, I shouldn't have stitched that far, okay? So what did I do wrong? Look at mine. What did I do wrong? Can you see it? These are backwards. This green should be turned this way. This green should be, so the greens should be this way. Okay? So you're going to do things like that. So there's nothing I can do except I have to take this block out and this block out. but I don't need to unsew the whole thing. So I have to turn these blocks. So I would undo my seam here. Well, let me undo it. I'm not going to resew it, but let me undo it so you can see what I mean. Because I wouldn't want you to take the whole thing apart if you don't have to, because the more you handle it, the worse things get. So I'm going to come across here, picking my seam out, and I'm going to stop like right here. Well, let's see if I can get in there. I mean, if you really wanted to take it all apart, you could, but why would you? But if I show you this, if you undo it, then it's not the same anymore. So what I did is, let me go a little bit further. So can you see? Because I need to fix this block. I don't need to take this apart. I just need to turn it. Okay, so I need to take this block out to turn it, but I don't need to take this all apart. So, but I need to come into, well, there we go. I need to come into this block a little bit to be able to, because I have to redo this seam and this seam. Okay, in the same way this way. And I did such a nice job too. Now, this one I have a little more problem because I've got to take this seam out first, because this seam going this way, the seam going this way is over this one. But I got to take this out. I got to take these two guys apart anyway. So do you feel better that someone made a mistake? Well, that I made a mistake, not someone. I am someone. I am the someone. And you have to sew it back in the same order that you sewed it the first time. And if it's too confusing for you, then just take it apart. But see, I have to come into this seam. Can you see? I have to come into the pink part a little bit in order to get to this seam. So I'll just do one. Does anybody have any questions? Is this part too complicated to understand? It's less complicated when you actually do it. Not make the mistake, but fix the mistake. Okay. So I want to put my flower so it's in the right place. And so this is how this should be. See how this one is wrong? So this is how this one should be. So I can, because I got this out of my way, I'm going to take this and I'm going to flip it up. You guys might have been yelling to me that I had it wrong the whole time. So I'm fixing column 3 of row 2. And see, by coming into the next one a little bit, I'm able to get it out of the way so I can put this seam in. So let's see if I can make it make sense to you. So let's see if this starts to make sense. So don't worry about the third row, but see now, I've got my first two rows correct, but they're divided now here. So now I just have to go back like I did originally and flip this one on top. And my seam allowances are pretty much going to stay the way they were. So I'm going to do a little pin there. Get the thread. I guess I better get the threads out of the way. And I can see this fabric already wants to fray. This background fabric that I have, I don't know what it is. So because I undid part of this seam, I want to go back to a section where it's already stitched, and I'm going to lock my stitch there and then sew down the end. I want to lock my stitch because it's in the middle of a row and there would be nothing to keep it from unraveling. So the first thing I want to do is, I can't see here, is I want to make sure, the reason I couldn't see is because there were no stitches there, so I need to back up a little more. But I want to bring my needle down. I'm going to use my my hand wheel to do it. I want to bring my needle down right into the stitches that I did before. I'm going to lock it, and then I'm going to finish it. Okay. So see, now I have row 1 and 2 are good to go. So now I just have to undo this. This is a little more. So I have to, now it really looks funny. I have to take this block out entirely. So I have to undo it from this end and this end. And then put this block, then I'll put this block back in, which makes this row. And then I can just flip it and stitch again. Does everybody get that okay? Okay. Where are we? Christine, I'm not answering on the grounds it would incriminate me. Uh-oh. Did you do the same thing? Yeah, stick with me, Christine. So did everybody understand that okay? Did you want me to resew this? I'll give you a second because you may be sewing to see if you need me to resew that for you, so you can see or not. Just let me know. I'll give you 1 minute. Can anybody decide? Let's see if anybody did. Let's see. No, yes. Okay. Okay, Christine, now you got a no, a yes, and a yes. Okay. The no must have been something else. Okay. You're only one person, Christine. You can't have both answers. Okay, so let me take this apart. And again, if if you're done, if you don't need to watch it, if we're near the end anyways, if you don't want to. But I'm sure this will happen to you sometime. Okay, so one's apart. Now I got to take these two apart. So I'm redoing row 3 is really what I'm doing. Okay, so here's my row 3. So I know there's 2 plain ones on the end. So this guy, see how he's supposed to be? And I had him like this. He was supposed to be this way. So before I sew row 3 to row 2, I have to finish row 3. So rather than sew this block on and then this block on, I'll sew these 2 together. You see how we are? So I'll sew these 2 together and then sew this to that one. So before I go too far, I want to make sure I have the pin in the side I'm supposed to sew. Let's double check, okay? Because I might get over to my sewing machine and sew down this side. I can't even tell you how many times I've done that until I started just putting the pin in. But can you see how ravelly I'm getting, how shreddy? And now I got 4 pins out. Okay, now I got to remember we pressed towards our plain blocks, and I put that back down. Yeah, that's looking a little better. That looks more like the picture. So now, because I moved this, I took some of this seam out. You see right there? It won't be in my way. Let me take this, flip it up. Okay. Put the pin in. Okay, so maybe you can see this. So see, I need to stitch across here, and I just needed to have row 2 away from row 3 without taking the whole row off. I mean, without undoing the whole of row 2. Hope that makes sense. And that lets me fix that one stitching that I did where I told you I was crooked. See that? See? Something was telling me to straighten it out. Okay, so I'm going to lay it back down. So see? So now I just have to attach row 2 and 2 to 3. I can flip this up. And remember, I took out part of column 1 so that when I start stitching, I'm going to start stitching on top of where I have real stitching, lock it, and then continue on. But the first thing I have to do is pin just like I did before to make sure my seam allowances are nestled together. Oh, keep grabbing more pins. So I'm so used to putting my pins back that I'm just grabbing more. Okay, so I didn't undo this stitching at the beginning, so part way up this stitching is where I'm going to start. You just check and see. So rather than put my foot down, I'm going to use my hand wheel so I can see and put my needle right in to my previous stitches, then put my foot down, then lock the stitch, and then continue on. And I'm at the end. I want to make sure I line up my two ends. Make sure my fabric underneath and on top are still lined up. And that was me going over a couple seam allowances there. That's okay. So now we're all fixed. Do you like that, Christine? Wasn't so bad. So there we are, all fixed. Is there a round of applause out there? So that will happen to you that you do something wrong. So I didn't line up well here, and I could always just undo that and fix it. But this is just the practice, so it's fine. Okay, so now I would look at the back, and I think that this is naturally, these are the last two seams we did, and that mine are just kind of naturally falling where they're going to fall. Sometimes you just got to let them tell you what they're going to do. And if it sits nice and flat, that's fine. So now you would take it over, before you square this up, you want to give it a good press, not iron, press. And then flip it over. And I'm a steam person myself. And I would press this. And then I would just let it sit until it cools off. You don't want to pick it up while it's hot, because whatever you pressed is not going to stay. Lynn, wash hands. I got to wash my hands. Are they dirty? Or did you wash your hands of the whole thing? I'm not sure. Okay. So now we've got our last practice block done. Hopefully everybody will have their fabric. So congratulations if you got it done. Go if you want to put your block up on my Facebook page, Miss Loreens Facebook, Miss Loreens Schoolhouse on Facebook. I posted today a reminder of the class tonight. You can just put your picture right in the comment there, because everybody would like to see it, even if you did a different block. We don't judge. It's good. We're good to go. So we're going to be starting with this. We're going to do some real blocks. And we already did this block. So we're going to start with this block right here. Can you see? We already did that last week, the week before, one of those times. So we'll start easy, and then we'll do another easy, and then they'll get a little bit harder, but that's okay. Does anybody have any questions? And I'm doing it Christmas fabrics. You can do it with scrap fabrics. You can do it whatever colors you'd like to do. Oh, thanks, Rhonda. Rhonda gave me some applause. Let's put it up so we can all go, yay, applause. Applause. Okay. Okay, so Christine is asking a question about best press. I don't need to best press now, because I best press before I cut my fabrics in the Gemini. My fabrics were already best pressed. And best press, for some people that may not know, best press is instead of starch. Starch is flaky and draws bugs. So best press is a non-starch starch. How's that? Non-starch starch. The name of this block, Christine, is it the star block? So in the Gemini book, it is page 6, the top block. And Christine, I know you're using the Accuquilt cutter, so whatever block you want to do, if you want to do something that's similar to that. Yeah, I'll put it up closer so you can, if you want to take a picture of it. You can change to whatever blocks you want. These are 6. You can do an 8-inch block with your Accuquilt cutter or whatever. You can do whatever size block you darn well want. How's that? Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Did everybody do okay, especially with the cutting? Hopefully you did better than I did with the sewing, but hey, there was a lesson there, a lesson to be learned. Well, I meant the lesson to be learned is not to do it, but the second lesson is what to do to fix it. So you know how I took it apart in pieces? Well, I've had it where I put a whole quilt top together and then found one block that wasn't quite right. And I do the exact same thing. I just unpick it to get to the points I need to. But whenever you unpick, you got to go halfway into the part that you don't need to resew, just so that you can get the fabrics sewn back together with enough room. You're not fighting it and ended up. And then if you don't take that inch or so off and unpick it, then you're going to end up sewing more pieces into where they don't belong, if you kind of know what I mean. So rather than fight it, just undo a little more. And if it's not enough, undo a little more and you'll be fine. Anybody have any questions left at the end here? I'll wait a minute or two to see if anybody has any questions. Last drink of water or wine. So we'll meet back again next Thursday at 7. I try to come on a few minutes early and you just, sit and gab, because I gab and you have to listen. That's kind of mean of me. You can't, well, you can mute me. You can mute me till 7. How's that? Okay, so thanks everybody for joining in. Be sure to hit the like button, thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe. Ring the little bell, because I did this time, I put up a little, videos or tutorials starting soon, or classes starting soon, or at what, if I usually start like at 6:50, but I really don't start the class until 7. I just like to make sure the camera's working, the sound is working, and everything's good, so that we don't have to rush at the last minute. So thanks again for everyone joining in, and thanks for the thanks. And I will see you all next Thursday.